everyone, welcome to our next Ag Insider. Can you guess where I am? Looks like we're in a maple sugar house, doesn't it? Well, I'm actually here at the Hamburg Fairgrounds in the Agriculture Discovery Center, where you can see the process of sap to syrup during the 12 days of the Erie County Fair. But since it is maple season and we have a lot of wonderful producers in our area, we're going to travel to a farm down in Collins, New York to see what it's like to be in a real maple sugar house and see how their production works. Come along.
Hi guys, so the very first step into making maple syrup is finding a sugar maple tree. Now there are over 1,000 different species of maple trees, and you can only make maple syrup from one, and that is our sugar maple. So how do you identify a sugar maple? First thing you have to do is look at the leaves. So on a sugar maple, it's very easy to tell their leaves because they have 5 large points. So if you look on my shirt, we have our 5 lobes. All other maple trees only have those top 3. So we're going to be in the fall or summer, we're going to come and look at the leaves. Also a nice way to identify them is looking at the bark. You could tell it has a nice gray color and it is rough. So once we find our tree, how do you get the sap out of it? And the easiest way to get the sap out of it is not cutting down the tree. We're going to drill a hole. So we are going to use our drill with a special drill bit, and we want to make sure there are no other holes from previous seasons, and we're just going to go 1 inch to 1.5 inches deep because we don't want to go any further because sap only flows on the first 3 inches of a tree because trees grow from the outside. So once we do that, we are going to use our tap. This is also called an adapter or a spout. And we're going to give this a nice tap into the tree. And this is going to act like a straw. It's going to help the sap come straight out. And these taps are specially designed to hold a bucket. And you can see, here comes the sap. But on bigger maple farms, we don't use buckets. So on our farm here, we have over 2,000 taps. So that means around 2,000 trees. So we don't use buckets because that's going to take too much time and we need a lot of people. So what we use now is something called tubing. And it is the same idea as the bucket. So we're going to have our special adapter, but here is our tube. Think of it as a nice long straw. Instead of that sap falling into the bucket, it's going to flow through this tube, and it's going to take all the sap and put it in one big holding tank. Now that we collected the sap is going to come into the sugar house and into our bulk holding tanks where it'll eventually make its way to the evaporator. Now here's a question for you guys. All right guys, now we're in the main part of the sugar house. As you can see, we have our evaporator and it is running. So that sap is going to come out of that back room and it's going to travel into our preheater. This is going to start to warm up the sap. It's eventually going to end up in this bottom pan where we're trying to get rid of as much water as possible before we come to the front. The front pan is where all the magic happens. So now we are taking that 2% sap and we're going to try to get it to 66.9% sugar. So you guys can see this is the most important part. Our pans have separate channels in here, and that is because as it's creating that steam and that water vapor is leaving, our sap is going to get thicker and thicker as the sugar condenses. So So it's going to travel through these different channels till it eventually ends up in our back pan. So how do we know when it is syrup? A fun way to check when it is syrup is by a nice simple, we're going to take a little scoop and we're going to watch it drip down our scoop. And as you can see, it's starting to get thick and it's almost dripping like a sheet of paper. But a nice, easy, simple way that we watch it is if we watch the temperature. So here is our goal temperature. We want it to be up to 218.9 degrees. What we're at right now is 217. Once we get to our green gold number here, it's going to automatically come out and go into our pan. But when this happens, we're also going to double check it. And we're going to double check it with something called a hydrometer. And a hydrometer is very important. We're going to take a scoop out with a bowl and check it. We're going to drop it in. And we want this to float at that top red line. That top red line means we have 66.9% sugar. If it goes past this, that means we overcooked our syrup. But we can still fix it. It's not too far gone. We can put it back in our pans, mix some fresh sap in there, and start boiling all over again. But once we get past this red line and close to this black line, that means we're in trouble. That means we burnt the syrup and there's no fixing it. That means we would stop everything, put the fire out, and take everything out of the pans, and it would go in the garbage, and then we'd have to clean the pans. Here's a question for you guys. All right, guys, now you can see we finally hit the correct temperature, and what is coming out is our syrup. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our cup, we're going to capture some of that syrup, we're going to put our hydrometer in there. Remember, we want it to float at that red line. Now that we got that. An interesting part about maple syrup is it creates something called sugar sand. All trees have sugar sand, but now that we condensed it, now we have to filter that sugar sand out of our syrup. So what we're going to use is we have a filter press. And this filter press, it has filter paper in here, and its syrup's going to travel all the way through here to get rid of that sugar sand and anything else that might be in it. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn on our pump. So it's going to travel from our bin through the filter, and it's going to end up in our drum. So another cool fact about syrup is it changes color. So does that mean it has different amounts of sugar? No, it means the weather changed. They all have 66.9% sugar because they were all checked with our hydrometer. But in the beginning of the season, so think January, February, we typically make this nice light golden syrup. But as we go from February to March, it's going to start to change. It's going to get a little darker because now the weather is getting warmer. Then as we get to the end of the season, so March into April, it's going to start to get really dark because now the trees are getting ready to make their leaves. So that sugar and the sap is going to start to change. Here's a question for you guys.
Now that you guys have learned the process of how maple syrup is made, March is a perfect time to get out in your own community and explore different sugar bushes. Visit mapleweekend.com to find a place local to you. You can even enjoy a pancake breakfast at Plotz's Maple or see all the equipment that goes into maple syrup production at Wendell's. Enjoy the maple season in Western New York.